When the heckling ceased, Addie peeked through the lace curtains. She was anxious what she'd look upon that evening. The village folk believes me to be a witch. In this year of the Lord, 1860, they think it is their right to burn me. As it drops dusk, Addie cast her eye over all those torches flickering in the breeze. A man in a top hat and windbreaker ventures nearer and banged 3 times on the door. They want to burn me at the stake, but they will burn the house with me in it. It's no mine to them. If you are ever in Indian Creek, you may hear the story, Addie McKay. My name is Jennifer Lee, and I'm going to tell you about a story I heard in a library in Missouri. It's been a while back now, but it struck a chord with me. What I mean is, I'm related to the woman in it, so the significance is far greater than it normally would have been. The librarian says her great-great-aunt was a member of the community in the story, and that is how she has come to possess this journal. These are the events as they transpired all those years ago in the sweltering summer of August, 1860. Back then, I was amongst one of the first settlers in town. Our leader was Virgil McKay. Now Virgil, he took a shine to me, and I'm not ashamed to admit it none. We had ourselves a special day, and we went to live up at the house on Shadow Hill. It was the biggest homestead in the area, and I was so excited. A winding dirt track wound its way to the big house. It was the happiest day of my life. Virgil was an acquired taste. He seemed a bit distant and was not the most passionate, but he was a leader and very stable and a real rock to be around. Nevertheless, things seemed to be bothering him. He never shared his feelings about what was on his mind and just became aggressive when questioned on the matter. It was when I was getting goods at the store and I heard 2 women babbling that anything even crossed my mind. The woman spoke of Shadow Hill being a burial ground. The next day, myself and some of the other women folk were up at Shadow Hill. We were in the big barn adjoining the house weaving. It was then that the damnedest thing happened. The sun had gone in the clouds, and the shadow of the grand home cast its blackness over the barn. It was then a horrific crash broke the silence. The 3 massive central beams in the barn came tumbling down. There were ear-piercing screams and mournful cries as the beams lay strewn on the straw-covered floor. One girl scampered away hysterically crying. Another lay tending her friend who lay beneath the huge piece of timber. Nothing could be done for her. We just took off her bonnet and stroked her head soothingly. Blood trickled from the corners of her pursed lips, and then she passed with a whimper. My friend and I said a few prayers. I looked after her wounds, and we declared that day one of mourning. As for myself, not but a scratch was left on my flesh, and this is where the rumors started. In the following weeks, this was not the only incident to happen. Some women down by the creek doing their washing in the valley spoke of a whirring noise. One's mind was dulled, and she was driven to ranting. On another occasion, a woman in the woods got stoned, from whom she does not know. Apparently, the stones were cast by some invisible entity. The woman is still healing now, and she is wrapped heavily in some poultices. So, you see why the settlers who live here do so in fear. A common theme since these happenings is the gossip. It all keeps pointing towards Shadow Hill. They also speak of me with an evil tongue, and the word witch is echoed freely. I believe this was the last event to be the one that sparked the hysteria. Spencer J. Hawkins was a livestock owner, living out on the ridge on the edge of the settlement. One night his barns burned down seemingly for no reason at all. They just flared up into some crazy inferno. Folks say that they had never seen anything like it in their lives. The startled animals ran scared, and it took days for them to be rounded up. But that was not the worst of it. 1 week later, there was news from Spencer J. Hawkins' homestead. He told people his animals had all gone crazy, running at trees and kicking each other. After his barns had burned down, he had nowhere to house any livestock. His worry was that his animals had a fever. Over the week, it seemed that all his fears were realized. One by one, the animals rolled over, dead. Dead cattle filled the field, and it wasn't just them dropping dead, which was weird. It's the speed at which the animals rotted. It was at an alarming rate. A new disease was feared. Every animal had to be slaughtered, whether it was dying or not. Even the dogs had to be put to death. To stop the spread of any disease, they burnt the carcasses on huge pyres. The stench was vile, and it could be smelt back in the village for days. The trauma of this was to be the breaking point for Spencer J. Hawkins. One dawn, Spencer J. Hawkins was found on his rocking chair on his porch. In his hands was his shotgun. He'd put the barrel in his mouth and pulled the trigger, blowing out his brains. He left behind a wife and 2 kids. Some say he took the coward's way out, but others say everyone has their breaking point. It seemed that some devilment cursed Indian Creek, but what it was had remained a mystery. That is, till we called in a shaman. The shaman spoke of curses and the sacrilege of burial grounds. He said Shadow Hill was a place where the dead once rested, and that it should have been left alone. The man wore a long beige windbreaker. He had a bit of a panache for extravagant about him. He had a Lincoln-like bowler hat, and he carried a skin-bound journal. His hand gestures were wild, his face gaunt and weathered. He singled out Virgil McKay, pointing at him aggressively. "You are the leader, are you not? I can remedy your problem at Indian Creek, but you must do as I say, and do not deviate from the path I set you on." Virgil McKay made a vow that he would follow through and not change his path in any way. He told me of the way to eradicate the curse that seemed to be upon us. I did not understand the reasoning behind his ways, but our options were very thin. He wrote down what I must do, the killing of a black goose. Virgil McKay was told that he had to kill the goose with a silver bullet, and if he did it, it would end the curse. So, Virgil hunted for a black goose. He'd melted down silver from a crucifix the night before. The whole town was apprehensive about the whole thing. McKay was a nervous wreck as he knew what he was going to face. That evening on the range, he came across a black goose. He took aim and shot at it. It flew away, but he had hit the wing bad. The man got home a few days later and went back to his house on Shadow Hill. The story becomes a bit of a mystery now. The house was empty. He went into the village to search for his wife. It was at the doctor's he'd found her surrounded by onlookers. The shaman ushered him to one side. Virgil McKay told the man it was done. He tapped his arm as if to tell him where he had shot the bird. He brushed past to see his wife. The shock he got was apparent to everyone. It appears Addie McKay had a bullet wound to her arm. In the thin mug, the doctor dropped a small lump of silver he had fetched out of the wound. There was a gasp. Everyone had their idea what this meant, but most jumped to the most obvious. Addie McKay was indeed a witch. The reason she had bewitched the place was to put down to the fact it was a sacred ground, and she wanted it for herself. From then on until the day they came for her, she was kept under lock and key up at the house. The shaman took charge, and he would see the job through to the end. Virgil McKay was never seen again. Some say she cursed him and he died of a bad year. Others say his shame was the end of him. This is a legend, and you all know how they change over the years. Back at Shadow Hill House, the shaman is banging on the door. The woman would not leave, so the baying mob set light to the timber house. It set the sky aglow. The crooked skyline was seemingly ripped apart that night. Flames leapt and scratched at the heavens. Crackling flesh stunk as she burned to a crisp. Her eyes popped as she ran out like a ball of fire. This is the story of Addie McKay and the legend of the Shadow Hill House. Next time you're in Missouri, take a stop at Indian Creek.